So my name is Rinku. I'm nearly 40. I'm a brown man. That's the colour of my skin. So it's kind of looks like kind of an old oak wood colour. That's what a friend told me. So that's what I look like. I'm wearing a dark blue t-shirt, and I want to introduce who I am and the kinds of projects and work I've been involved with. I work across a range of genres. I've got a range of different skills. I'm involved as a filmmaker. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm also a theatre maker. And I also produce a one-man show that I tour. So I just do you want to talk about racism straight away, Johnny? Do you want me to go for racism straight away off the bat?
It's what you feel comfortable with. Yeah, I think that's the whole point of it. I think double discrimination is something that I feel that you could be talking about, but opened up to that conversation, and it's really important.
Fine, of course. I know, I just want to make sure that I stick to the point. Okay, so I've been involved in making a documentary. It was called Double Discrimination. I wanted to raise the issue about racism in the British deaf community. But unfortunately, the reason why I raised this topic is that it's linked to my experience. And when school finished and I left school, it really hit me that there was an incredible amount of racism out in the community. Birmingham Deaf Club was incredibly racist. It wouldn't let my black or my Asian friends into the club. We wanted to be involved in football. When I was young, I was an incredible footballer, but actually I realised that I had offensive language delivered to me in football matches, also kind of physical abuse as well. So, and I'm just thinking, this isn't right. Why are people discriminating against me? And this is not acceptable. So I tried other careers, but I suffered from oppression, racist oppression throughout different careers that I've been involved in. So my sporting career and then other careers. I've also experienced racism, throughout my career. I've also had to accept very low paid jobs. I've had to work long hours for very low pay, and people would complain if I was 5 minutes late, but if white people arrived 10 or 20 minutes late, no one would complain about them. And I realized there's an inequality there that I started to pick up throughout my working life. And people also like to criticize you, and even when you haven't done anything wrong. And I realized, actually, that's it, I've had enough. It came to a point where I thought, this is it, and I wanted to raise this subject. And I got commissioned by BSL Zone. They accepted my proposal and they funded me to create this documentary. And it was really a training commission, because at that time I didn't mind. I wanted to raise this point. I didn't mind that I wasn't getting a professional filmmaker commission. It was a trainee filmmaker position. But I was just thinking about, this issue is so important, because at that period of time, no one had really talked about this. People had written books in the 1960s about racism in the deaf community in America, but that's it. There hadn't really been any movement since the 1960s. Everything had been swept under the carpet, everything had been ignored. So I thought, this is time to revamp this issue and raise this issue again. And I asked people to be involved, but it wasn't easy. A lot of deaf people really didn't want to get involved in the documentary. I think most of them had a fear of losing friends, losing their jobs, and losing opportunities. There was a real fear there in the community. I really had to persuade people to be involved. And it took me 10 months to make this documentary. And then when I released the film, it was released through Film 4 initially. And then I realized, it was really difficult. I had a huge amount of abuse afterwards. And it wasn't the first time it happened. Actually, throughout the process of making the film, people were denying there was racism in the deaf community. They were trying to tell me, that I wouldn't be allowed to raise this issue. It wasn't true. There wasn't any racism. And I realized, actually, I'm a sole voice here. There's a few people supporting me with this project. So everyone's sort of hiding from this subject. There's a real fear. But I thought, I've got to be brave. I've got to raise this. So, and then the documentary was released. I I received a huge amount of criticism for it, but I'm not sure if the film really was successful, because there was no campaigning afterwards. Again, I felt like it was ignored. Racism doesn't happen in the deaf community, and my documentary was swept again under the carpet. And I understand how, American black campaigners and Martin Luther King felt, and Malcolm X as well. I was thinking about how they felt when they campaigned, and how they managed to cope, and to raise this topic again and again, and not allow themselves to be derailed, and not allow the argument to die out. So I felt like I had the whole world attacking me after releasing this documentary, and that made things incredibly difficult for me. So from that moment, I'm not sure about, I think things have improved, because now France, Spain, Italy, Chile in South America, they've all wanted to support me, and they've tried to set up campaigns as a result of seeing my film, and actually doing a lot of grassroots campaigning about anti-racism. But that has never happened in Britain. So I realised, I felt that after my film had been released, I didn't have a job, there weren't any more opportunities, I had to pack up, give up my life in London. I gave everything up, I couldn't afford my flat, I had to move back to Birmingham, back to square one almost. I'm, back in my parents' house, and I had to go to the job centre, I had to sign on, had to claim benefits. There was no movement after that film for me. So, and then after a while, my film career really fizzled out. So, and since that time, 5 years, things have started to change. Young people now are starting to campaign. They're starting to share their experiences on social media. So I feel the younger generation have the power, and they really want to fight for equality. They believe in equality. And that's a big difference from my generation in the deaf community and the older generations. I think they find it hard to accept the truth that's out there, maybe. So I think that's it I can think of for the moment. Sorry, I haven't got a happy ending for you. It's not an American Hollywood movie with a lovely happy ending and everyone's happy and smiling. Unfortunately, that's not the case for me. It's really difficult. And, I questioned, did I do the right thing? Was I allowed to raise that point, or was I not allowed to raise that point? Because the British deaf community is so small. I received a huge amount of criticism by doing this documentary. And I think, that's the points that I can think of at the moment.
Thank you, Vinky. Could I just ask a very quick question? What I thought Double Discrimination for me was the most thought-provoking documentary that I've ever seen. I never believed there was racism within the deaf community, so I was quite surprised. But there were heart-wrenching stories that were in the film. But why is there just little action from the deaf organisation? Why? I don't understand. I'm just quite confused.
I think the reason is, when I tried to raise this issue, I felt perhaps something wasn't right in the British deaf system, the structures, the systems, how people work together, the opportunities weren't there. I think it was very clear to see, that the timing perhaps wasn't quite right. I think hearing people are doing action, they're really fighting for equality, for diversity and inclusion. But I think, the deaf community acted like nothing happened, or there is no racism. And I knew there was racism there, but I think deaf people are in a sort of denial culture. So I think it's a good reason that I did raise it. But I did lose a lot of my friends, Black, ethnic, deaf friends, don't want to be involved in the deaf community anymore. I think I've seen my friends have issues with alcohol, drugs, mental health, gone to prison. It's like a whole lost generation of Black and brown people. And I think, that's what's happened. People have been affected by racism, and that's the result. So you can't be two-faced and cover up these issues. It's obvious. I can see it within my own generation that racism exists and it's there, and with my own struggles with trying to find jobs. And I think like we need to sort of actually change the old British deaf structures. I think those have damaged our society. They've damaged us as Black and brown people and people of colour. So I think that's why I was really passionate about raising this issue.
Thank you, for telling a personal story about that. I feel like that one question I'd like to ask you: do you think that people are powerless to defend themselves against discrimination?
Well, that's a good question, Johnny, actually. And I've met some deaf people, and they were racist previously, and they've now apologised, but unfortunately, I'd have to say it depends on the generation. It actually is about the generation and the age of the person. We talk about Birmingham Deaf Club. I wasn't allowed in, and that was in 1995. So they sort of banned my friends from there, and then from about 2003 onwards, it's become a lot more inclusive. So I'm just thinking, who are you? You know, who are the people who banned it? It was the white deaf with privilege. They were also working, but they were working class. But I mean, I'm just thinking about 15 years later when I went back and I met some of those people and I asked them, can we have a chat, please? And they said, yeah, all right, we can have a chat. And I said, what made you want to become racist? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, what? How can you hate me or not like me because I'm a brown man? You know, where is this learning from? Where are this racist thinking from? And most of them replied and said, this thinking has come from my parents. And it really shocked me. And I thought, who are their parents? And I realized they are back, well, a long time ago in Birmingham. And we had the famous Enoch Powell Rivers of Blood speech delivered in Birmingham. So I think Enoch Powell was born in Birmingham. He was really anti-migration, and it was his kind of racist thinking and philosophy that has influenced the parents of that generation of deaf people and their thinking was influenced, and then we were the result. Our discrimination was the result of that thinking. So, you know, some deaf people who've gone to private school have that kind of privilege, and they've learned about racism from private schools. Some have learned from their parents who are maybe more progressive thinkers. But remember, at that time, we didn't have access. We didn't have subtitles, newspapers, and reading literacy levels were quite low. It was very difficult. So people have become very vulnerable, and they're accepted. They accept the narrative that they're told and just agree with it.
Do you think because of Black Lives Matter, there should be a double discrimination too?
Well, lots of people have asked me a similar question. They said, can you make part 2? And I just think, well, I don't know. To be honest, I've got to be honest. When I made that documentary, it took me 10 months. And it took so much of my time. And actually, I didn't really get paid properly for it. I had to do a lot of voluntary work. I had to persuade my friends to get involved. It was incredibly stressful. Also, deaf people had never had the opportunity to talk about racism at that point. So one Black woman arrived, and she was from abroad, and she'd arrived and wanted to speak to me. It was the first time she'd shared her stories of racism, and she'd actually experienced things from the Second World War. So it's like things are just not spoken about. She'd kept this all inside, and we're just thinking, you know, we must open up. We must be allowed to talk. It's about our well-being. And there's been a lot of arguments, you know, amongst the film crew when I was filming. A lot of arguments every day. I felt there were huge tribulations and arguments because people didn't believe that there was racism happening out there in the deaf community. So if you ask me to do part 2, I'm a bit like, not sure, but I'd need a really supportive team who believe that there is racist issues in the deaf community, that believe the Black and brown deaf community and the deaf community of colour. You know, we need to eat well, we need to sleep well, we also need some work-life balance, we need to enjoy life. You know, that time I didn't have any work-life balance. I was under a huge amount of financial pressure. So if you ask me about part 2, I don't know. I mean, I have written some stories and some stories for the theatre about this, and I'm thinking about making a new play called Chocolate, which is about, it's sort of inspired by the first black clown in history. And you know, and I'm just thinking about how do we make people understand, especially the deaf community, understand and accept that there are issues of racism within the community.
Thank you, Rinky. I'm just looking at the chat now. Everyone did really want to ask this question, and I'm sure it will open up to a lot of discussion. But I think we have to respect that. I really want to hear Maral to speak now before the break.
No problem.
Maral, who I'm really excited to hear from her. She graduated with an MA from the School of Jewellery and Silversmithing in Birmingham University in 2017. And her time in university, she created work that drew on her experiences of the deaf Iranian women with feminism, oppression, and the forced wearing of the hijab in Iran. So I'm going to hand over to Maral, and it'd be great if you could also describe yourself, and it'd be lovely to hear about some of the work you do and your perspective on discrimination. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Johnny. Hello, everyone. My name is Maral, and I've sort of got red curly hair to my shoulders, and I'm wearing a scoop neck, blue spotty t-shirt, short sleeves. I've got painted nails, I've got very bright red lipstick. So I'm from Iran originally, and I grew up in Iran, and I lived there for 25 years. And then I moved to the UK to study at university. So obviously in Iran, it's a patriarchal society. It's a patriarchal regime, so women are incredibly oppressed. And also another barrier that I face is also as a deaf person. So I have a double discrimination in Iran. So in Iran, you have no freedom of speech. You're not allowed to talk openly. So when I moved to the UK, I was really excited. I realized I could talk freely, but I learnt through my experiences that I was allowed to speak. Back in Iran, I was always sort of under the thumb. I was always oppressed. I couldn't be open about my thoughts and my feelings. And then moving to the UK, I actually had to learn how to be open and be free. So I also protest against the forced wearing of the hijab. In Iran, women are forced to cover themselves and men don't have to. Men don't have to have a head covering when they walk through the streets. We're told that the hijab is to protect ourselves from sort of men's lustful gaze. So I want to challenge that thought. So I cut my hair. And I used my hair to make jewelry. At the same time, I wore a hijab. And it was sort of a provocation to the patriarchy, and said, you can't see my hair, I'm wearing a covering, but you can see my hair on my brooch. So men, are you still tempted by me? Do you still have lustful thoughts because my hair is on display? And that was a provocation. So hair is really my material. And I really think about material, hair as an artistic material. I've always had to wear a hijab in Iran. When I leave the house from the age of 9, you were always forced to wear a hair covering to hide your hair, but your hair is still there. And when I went to university, I learnt about the deaf community. I started learning sign language. I learnt about the deaf community. And I found my deaf identity. In Iran, I didn't have any communication with deaf people. I didn't have any signed communication. I got by lip reading and trying to speak. And that was forced communication for me. I had to learn to lip read and I had to learn to try and speak. So I didn't have a deaf identity in Iran. But it was incredibly stressful. And the issue is, I didn't know sort of what was wrong with me. I just thought, oh, I'm so tired all the time. And I didn't know. I just thought, oh, Maral, you just moan all the time, you're just tired. And then I moved to the UK and I met the deaf community and I found my deaf identity. And I actually became empowered through that. I found my own voice, as it were. So I create, so recently I'm a jewellery maker. That's what I studied at university, jewellery making and silversmithing. So I like to make contemporary jewellery, and I made recently some ear jewellery, and they were bone china ceramic earpieces that you wear over your ear, and then they disrupt the environmental sound, and you have to experience sound through your body. So the aim of my work is to make hearing people empathise with deaf people. I'm a cochlear implant user, so sounds are slightly distorted. So I wanted a hearing person to actually experience sound the way I do with my bone china earpieces. I kind of want to force hearing people, my audience, to understand the experience that I've been through. So I did actually have a sharing at Autograph Gallery in London to actually show this happening, but unfortunately, because of coronavirus, the event was cancelled. But really, my work, and especially the bone china work that I've been creating recently, is about showing the discrimination that I have been through.
Lovely, thank you for telling us about your experiences of living in Iran and coming to the UK. Can I so how did living in the UK culturally affect you when you were living in Iran? Was it different? I'm sure it was different in many ways. Did you feel adapted more as a deaf person living in the UK than you did in Iran?
Okay. Yeah. So when I look back, and I was studying at university, and I cut my hair as a provocation to the Iranian regime. You know, I was thinking about the protests and the marches that have been happening by feminists in Iran. There's a whole group of women who are campaigning against the forced wearing of the hijab. It's an incredibly sensitive issue in Iran. So my work was actually seen, my work in the UK was seen by the Iranian authorities. So they were threatened, my parents, I was under threat, and that forced me, unfortunately, to become a refugee. So I'm now no longer can go back to Iran. So after university, I had to stay in the UK. I thought I might stay here for a year and learn and study jewelry at university, and then I'd go back to Iran, become a teacher, or develop my jewelry practice. Everything that I'd learned in the UK, I wanted to develop a business back in Iran, but unfortunately, because of my artistic vision and the work that I was doing in the UK, it became too sensitive. So I've had to stay in the UK. I became a refugee. I became homeless. It was really difficult. It was a really difficult time for a year going through that refugee status. So when I came to the UK, it had a massive impact on me. It really changed my life. And I've realised now I can stay in the UK, but, and I've got lots of things here. I'm very happy here. I've got a fantastic life here. Things are incredibly accessible here. But it wasn't actually my choice to become a refugee and apply for leave to remain in the UK. So when I was studying at university in the UK, I didn't have sign language at that time because I didn't have a sign system in Iran that I learned and then was able to adapt in the UK. So I came to the UK, I was desperate to meet other deaf people, but the university didn't really support me to find that deaf community. They didn't support me to learn BSL. These are all learnings that I've had to go through myself. I've had to try and lip read English throughout my MA course in the UK. So it really actually did delay my learning. It sort of delayed me. It made me sort of fall behind my hearing peers. I missed a huge amount of information throughout my MA. So after I learnt BSL, after I left university, that was a huge impact. That helped me find my deaf identity, and I've become, it's really affected my well-being. I'm obviously much better. I'm much more empowered. Without learning sign language, you know, I'd have to force myself to speak to you. So, I mean, I've been through a huge learning experience, as you can imagine, from moving, you know, after moving to the UK.
Incredible. I'm really great that you've come into the UK and found your identity, your deaf identity, so you could be empowered as an artist, as a woman, and I love the work you do. I've been looking at your artwork. I'm not sure if it's possible to share any of the artwork on there, but I'm quite fascinated with.
Oh yes, I think we can share some work. Morale's nodding.
One of the artwork which I love you to talk about is the tale of Trotted, which is, I felt quite moved by that, and I love it for you to share that with the members here.
Okay, so what you can see on the screen is it's a coconut shell that's covered in human hair, and that hair was sent to me by my friend from Iran, so I asked her to cut her hair and post it to me so I could make that brooch for her using her hair. So my jewelry is created using real human hair, and there's the brooch is unique. It's linked to her unique identity, and it's actually, the hair covers a coconut shell, and the coconut shell is reminiscent of a woman's breast. So it's a double kind of challenge to the patriarchy. I'm wearing my hair on my breast, on my body. So okay, so this image that I'm showing is an Iranian woman who cut her hair. You can't see her hair because she's wearing a grey hijab, a veil that covers her hair. But she's also wearing the brooch that I made for her with her hair. And she's standing against a beautiful ceramic tiled background depicting horses and antelope running through a forest. And the next image, I think, will show my ceramic ear jewelry.
So shall I? So I think that is a bit of a tacky too. That right? Some people can't see Morale. Okay, is that better? So Morale, you actually explain something about the bone china earpiece, if you can, without the image. I think it would be easier because some of you can't see design.
Okay, Morale. Okay, so my bone china ear jewelry. So this was a new material for me. It was bone china, and I carved bone china before its final firing. It's covered with a woman's feminist protest poem in Farsi, and so you would wear the ear jewelry over your ears, and it will interrupt the sound, and it will affect you emotionally. I think if you as a hearing person wear the jewelry, it will affect the sound.
So is that something that's been completed, or is that stopped because of COVID? And where do you hope to go with that project?
So this project will carry on, both the tale of tresses and my ceramic ear jewelry. And usually to share the work, I put the work out and ask people to try on the work. And also, I'm also researching about making a rug with human hair and talking to migrant women and refugees about their stories and weaving them into hair. My ceramic ear jewelry is actually called a project, If You Want to Be Alive, Read My Lips. And at the moment, that project is in development to make a large, almost a head covering from that ceramic ear jewelry. I want to actually make a head covering in the same shape, because I did some testing events in Birmingham at Steam House, which is an artist residency studio, and people were feeding back and saying it might be interesting to make a bigger shape that you can sort of put your head and shoulders in. So that's kind of a development of this project.
It looked amazing. I mean, I really hope you progress with that project. And for me, when I make work and artists, it's about really re-educating and staying with Rinky. You know, we want to re-educate people, and I think the way we do it is through our art. And I think at this time now, with the problem we have with the funding in the art, and people ask me the question, what did art mean to you? Art means everything for me, you know, in terms of how I make work politically, in the way of art in other people, look at the impact of how we look at society. I've just realised there's lots of questions on the Q&A, and I'm quite excited about it. So what I'm suggesting is, I think what we should do is have a bit of a break, because otherwise I feel like I could be asking you all the questions, but I want to open it up to everyone. So if we could have a bit of a break now, and perhaps give the interpreter, the captain a break. I need a break because I need to go to the toilet. And maybe if we could come back, I think, please don't go away, come back for, should we say 10 minutes? Okay, thank you for coming back. That was a really great first session there. I've taken in all this information there, and it made me realise again how much I don't know. So I'm just going through some of the questions here. There's lots of questions here. I'm hoping we get through it. So this is a question from David. I don't know if David is happy to speak.
Yes. So really, my question was to Rinku, and it was about racism. Because, well, really, first of all, sorry, let me go back and say thank you so much to the panel for this event. I've really enjoyed it. It's amazing. It's been a really interesting learning experience. Thank you. And also, I'm just, for those who don't know me, I'm the chair of the Deaf Centre, a Cardiff Deaf Centre, and it's the Deaf Hub. We've had a name change recently, and I'm aware of issues in the deaf community about oppression, racism, for example. So the first thing I did was think about the Deaf Centre's kind of banner, and wanted to say the Deaf Centre welcomes all at the venue. So really, my question is to Rinku. What do you feel is the cause of racism? And do you think there's any education activities we could do, or something about language maybe? Because we're stuck with old-fashioned language. You know, we've not caught up maybe with modern society in terms of our signed languages and forms of language. There, yes, Rinku's saying I'll answer. Thank you for raising this point, David. Thank you. It's really, really important, and language is a really important question. And it affects deaf people. There are issues of racism and discrimination still in the community. So when you talk about education, I think the same as you. I think it's all based on education. So some deaf people didn't have proper educational opportunities. Education wasn't really advanced for deaf people. There are issues with literacy, and so they can't access the information. So they don't understand what's going on out there. What's the right thing to say? What's the wrong thing to say? What's the right or wrong thing to do? So it's interesting actually that there's a deaf private school, which is amazing, and it's got a huge amount of privilege if you go to that school. You know, people that come out of that school traditionally have much better quality of life compared to other deaf people in the community that are still struggling. So that private school really trains deaf young people, so they have much better levels of literacy and understanding, and they have that understanding of racism. So I've asked around the deaf community, do you think deaf community is prevalent in schools? And they say, unfortunately, this school with this incredible privilege has got racism inside. So I'm thinking it's about education. It's about explaining why we're here. How and why are we here? And why has racism happened? A lot of deaf people don't understand, you know, what's happened in terms of slavery, the issues of the slave trade coming through America. Why have we got privilege? Why there's sort of systemic privilege in one culture and not in another? So racism is such a wide topic. It's not one topic, and deaf people don't have access to that information, so they are naturally left behind. And who's responsible for making sure that deaf people are encouraged to have that understanding about racism, anti-racism, race issues? I mean, we need to talk about racism. We need to talk about it on Facebook and social media. We've seen it go out there now. It's a really difficult topic. But if you think about deaf people making films or theatre, you know, they're not talking about racism, whereas the hearing community are in their social media and their you know, so there's a difference between hearing and deaf use of social media and engaging with political issues. And sorry, was there another question, David? Yeah, it was about language. So forms of language. Rinku saying, yes, oh, sorry, apologies. I've unpinned Rinku. So yes, there's an issue with sign language. For example, I'm demonstrating some signs where we've got the middle finger on the forehead. That's a racist slur. Fist across the face, that's a racist slur as well. But unfortunately, these are still used for people of specific race. So, and I think when you look linguistically, it is a racist slur, but people won't accept it. They don't understand that it's discriminatory language, and it really, people lose confidence if you use those signs. They won't go to deaf club. They won't get involved in the deaf community. And there's an increased risk of mental health issues. And I know my peers have really suffered through these two or three racist signs. There's quite a few, unfortunately, depicting race in sign language, and it's not actually to do with BSL and British Sign Language. That's fine, keep British Sign Language, be proud of your language, but there's just a few signs that really are specifically racial slurs. You know, you hurt people's feelings using these signs. They need to stop, and people refuse to stop using them, even though people of colour are explaining this. So I want to encourage people to move on now, to drop these old signs that are damaging. We should be in a world of equality now. And David saying, yeah, what's your answer now? And Rinku saying, well, there are still signs depicting Chinese people, Asian people, and Black people that are racist. But when you talk about the word racism, it's so broad. There's just not one element to racism. So, you know, I talk about language a lot. This is a point that I talk about. This language that you're using, these racist signs, are discriminatory, and it is time to stop. And some people do ignore me, but I think if we don't talk about this is going to cause big problems for us in the future. And I think that's my duty, really, to campaign to get these specific signs dropped from sign language.
I think the next question, but I think from Pauline Burt from Film Camry, got an important question to read. Are you happy to speak, Pauline?
I am, thanks, Johnny. Mine's for Rinku as well. Thank you so much for making the film. It sounds as if it would take a lot of courage to do that, and I'm very sorry that you had it had the impact that it did in terms of the negativity that you received. I run the film agency, the development agency here in Wales, and I was wondering what Channel 4 or Film 4 did to frame the discussion, perhaps putting your work alongside other pieces in a series, or creating forums for discussion, and also whether or not they followed up with you as a filmmaker to find out about more work that you wanted to do, and to support you in your journey.
And Rinku's saying, I've no idea, really. It's very difficult for me to say. When I had those initial discussions, hang on, sorry. It's really difficult. So, to be honest, I can see the difference between Britain and other countries. Other countries are so interested in my work. I've been selected for film awards. I've been selected to share the film. They've hosted debates and discussions after sharing the film. They've talked about the negative aspects of racism, and also in the Swedish TV company, Swedish TV channel. I think it was quite a famous, it's kind of like the Swedish equivalent of BBC. It's UTV in Sweden. And they were so interested, and they selected my film to be broadcasted on their channel, and it went out throughout the whole of Sweden. And then I got messages, we had discussions, and I was thinking, wow, I'm sorry to say, but I haven't had this kind of questioning, and I haven't had this interest in the issues of racism in the UK. People are just not interested in it. In, you know, deaf film festivals in Britain don't seem to be interested in it. In America, I've received awards, disability awards for the film. Yeah, Disability Justice Awards I've received. And that was from America. But in Britain, I'm like, hello, I've made this film. I was born here. You know, we've got issues of racism here, and no one cares. No one's interested. So I'm sorry to be really, really blunt, but I mean, this is my message for 5 years. There's been no interest, no excitement, no framing of my work.
Oh, that's really disappointing. I'd love to see the film. I don't know where it's available now, and to talk and see if maybe we could bring it to a festival in Wales and have a discussion within that kind of forum.
I'm hoping Rachel will put that in the chat box. Thank you very much for that, Pauline. I'm going to hand over to Miranda. I think Miranda's got a question for Miranda. If it's possible, Miranda, if you order to drive it out before you ask the question, please.
Hi, I'm Miranda Ballin, and I work for Spark, a youth arts project in the Valleys. I'm wearing a little blue silk headband. I've got my glasses on, and I've got a grey top on. I've got crazy curly hair, for those who know me. Yeah, my question was for Maral. Thank you both to Rinko and Maral. It's just such a fascinating and quite harrowing stories to hear, but it's so incredible to have this in Wales. So a massive thank you to you both. And I was really interested to hear Maral talk about her experience in Iran, but I just wondered if you had experiences, Maral, of overt racism in the UK as well, or the kind of criticism that Rinko had experienced. I don't know if you feel comfortable to talk about that, but I just wondered if that was the case. No problem. So the question was whether you had experienced the kind of any kind of overt racism in the UK. It's really clear about Iran, but have you experienced that here in the UK?
Yes. So yes, my experience. Okay. So my experiences in the UK of discrimination have been really through well, for example, networking. So it's really important for myself as an artist to have networks and collaborations, but that's a big barrier for me. In fact, that's my biggest barrier as a deaf person. I can't access those networks. And also different groups, they don't think about deaf people or deaf artists. They don't make their kind of activities accessible. For example, if I want to apply, you know, for an exhibition, for a sculpture exhibition, I think there's a lot of favoritism as well. I think if I get a recommendation, that's great, but I'm a new artist, I'm new to the UK, I'm an emerging artist, so I want to apply to get my work exhibited, but you know, I haven't had that real experience yet, and I feel that I'm kind of ignored as an emerging artist. So I do think there is some kind of discrimination under the surface. It's, you know, I think it's about being a deaf person, it's also about being an emerging artist.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think surely he'd be waiting to ask the question. So if you want the interpreter, it is Claire. Are you signing, Claire?
Yeah, Claire can sign for me. That'd be great. Yeah.
And Shirley will be speaking. If you could order to describe it out before, that would be great.
Okay. Hello, my name's Shirley David and I'm wearing a pink jumper and I have long blondish hair, but with COVID-19 it's going darker because it's normally yeah, and I've been involved with the deaf community for, I don't know, 15 years or so. And I want to just make a couple of points really before I ask a question. And I think when there's been a lot of talk about the generations and what barriers are and why things are not progressing, etc. Because I'm 58. My generation, there was a big difference in terms of racist awareness and racist attitudes. I can see in my grandparents' generation a huge racist approach to immigrants and to people coming into the country who were different. And there was a lot of racist language that was just accepted by the white community. And we're talking about the hearing community, obviously. But you have to remember that Darwin teaching was that there was a difference between, you know, people came from monkeys and they became humans, and the black people were less developed. That was the teaching that was given to people. So people were indoctrinated into an idea which was false. So when you talk about education, education is very important, but it has to be the right education. And when we talk about generations changing, and we look at sign language changing, people have just accepted certain signs as the right sign. And now there's a lot more awareness about racism, and language is beginning to change and accept those signs are not appropriate. And I think that's great, and it's perfectly, you know, the way we should be going. But we have a twofold problem, and I want to see what your view is on this, because I think that not just racism is a problem in the deaf community, but bullying and harassment generally. And I've seen a lot of people who have mental health issues, people who have alcohol problems, people who have physical disabilities, who have been bullied in deaf clubs. And this is something that's been taught and a learned behaviour from bullying that they actually experience themselves from hearing people in residential schools often. We learn bad behaviours. And I wonder if this is something that you've considered and actually came up, perhaps Rinku, and addressed this to you. When you were doing your research, was there any aspect of this general bullying and harassment culture that you looked at as part of the racism issue? Because I think there's a huge link.
I'm just putting everyone. Okay, Rinku's saying, yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, I feel that maybe some or maybe most people who are born with a discriminatory mindset. I think everyone's born with some element discriminated against them. I think everyone's born with something that people want to discriminate against them, whether it's their gender, whether it's their ethnicity, whether it's their deafness, whether it's their physical characteristics. So I've got double discrimination. I'm a deaf man and also I'm brown. So those are my two elements that I'm discriminated against. But when I talk about how people back then in the old days behaved, I think they just didn't have awareness. I didn't think that it was like a dog being kicked and then it's passed on to the next generation. That kind of attitude is just passed on generation to generation. So my issue within the deaf community, I mean, I guess it's a little bit different. It's that for example, when I talk about the three different racial signs that depict people who are Asian, Black, or Southeast Asian Chinese, I think British Sign Language has been colonialized by British white people. So sign language itself has been colonialized. So who's kind of decided on the forms of language that we use? So that means really, when I've done research, I've done an awful lot of talking within the deaf community, an awful lot of research. They think that potentially through the missionaries and the church who kind of set up the deaf schools, the deaf clubs, they've created these, unfortunately, these racial signs, and you know, and now you know, these signs, if you sign these specific signs, then you'll have an emotional response to it. So they might smile and sign this sign for Indian, which is a racial slur that unfortunately, you know, and also if you smile or if you frown as you sign, it will evoke a different reaction from the audience. So really, language, you know, they've kind of been delivered, these racial slurs, with a smile, and that's really damaged people. And you know, we are all human. You know, we all have emotions, we all get upset. And I remember when I moved to London, and I met deaf Asian people in London. Some of them went to private school. They were ashamed of their ethnicity, and they were ashamed to be Asian. They were so ashamed to be Asian. And I said, why? And they said, because racism has been ongoing, and Asian deaf people feel like, you know, we are bad people. We have been, you know, they've kind of taken these racial slurs and this racism and internalized it. And I've said, you've got to stop doing that. That is not correct. You cannot internalize this racism. You have to live your life. And I guess it depends where you grow up, where you go to school, which school you go to, you know, and do you allow people to discriminate against you? And I feel that discrimination has kind of taught me how to work with people better, actually. You know, if you think about females, disability, blind, I've actually, you know, thought about discrimination I've experienced, and I've said, right, I'm going to change my behavior and give out a really, really positive vibe. You can be racist towards me, but I'm going to support you. So I think, unfortunately, that most people have discrimination, kind of, they're born with this internalized discrimination. It can affect their thinking, and it can affect their journey. They're kind of born with this expected, they're expected to be oppressed from birth.
Yeah, the other thing I think is really important to think about is the language issue, because I think both yourself and Mara actually said about language issues. And having supported somebody who's got learning difficulties, who had a session delivered on bullying, and she, up until that point, she'd been to sessions with this club that she was going to, and she'd never really taken part. And I was signing for her so she could understand what was being said in the group discussion, and the topic of bullying came up. And I had to actually explain what the word bullying meant, and explain the sign, because she'd never been taught it before. And when we actually went through and explained what it was, she suddenly said, I want to say something, which was really shocking for myself and the group, because it was the first time she'd ever done it. And she said, I have been bullied in school, but I did not know that that's what it was. And I think this is an issue, because unless we understand the signs, we understand the language, and we understand the meaning, we can't deal with the problem. So the first thing has to be education. And I think you've been completely right on this, because without using the correct signs and without using the correct sort of explanations about what we're talking about, people are just lost. And they have been bullied, they have been racially abused or harassed, and they don't know it, and they don't recognise it and see it in themselves. And just as a little aside, if anybody's been seeing this is America, the programme that's on about the women's rights, I think this is completely shown in that. Because in there's a group of women who are campaigning for women's rights, and another group of women who are saying, stop the ERA bill, because they're frightened that they're going to lose their rights as a woman to stay at home and have babies and do things that they do normally. And there's a complete misunderstanding about what's being fought for. And it can happen in any discriminatory battle.
Thanks, Shirley, for that. I feel like there might be some other question that somebody want to ask. I think they had a question from Martin. Did Martin want to ask a question?
Hi, I'm Martin Griffiths. I'm deaf-blind. I'm the guy with kind of dark hair, blue shirt, and a blue background. So I was just wondering, I'm on social media quite a lot, and I just see it doesn't matter whether I look at, say, the South Wales Argus and the comments that people make in response to, say, statues and Black Lives Matter. I see a lot of racism every single day. I'm actually sad that some of my own friends are sharing the kind of Black Lives Matter gatherings and expressing outrage at the lack of social distancing, but they don't share the pictures of people on a beach in Bournemouth and that sort of thing. So, so what I'm sensing is since the Brexit incident, I just see the rise of what I call the far right, and not just in the UK, but in other countries as well. So I was actually wondering whether Vinku and possibly Mawal think there's a danger that we could actually go backwards, because I'm actually really worried as a person who is discriminated about because of my deaf blindness, if you like. I often wonder if things are going to go backward for me as well because of the way the media is presenting people who were making progress, but I'm just worried to be going backwards. What do people think about that?
I'll leave it to that.
Are you asking me directly, Rinku's wondering?
Yeah, I'd like to know what you think, Vinku, and possibly Mawal, if she has something to add.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's difficult because of the pandemic and coronavirus issue. It's had a huge impact. I think it's made people incredibly scared. I think people have to listen to the government. The government is saying we've got to lock down, we've got to stay at home. People went crazy, the whole kind of selling out of toilet roll, panic buying. So, it was a strange time, prior to lockdown. And then later, I think the issue is people aren't allowed to go out. I think people find it hard to say lockdown in the home. I think it's very difficult for them to be patient, to stay at home. So I understand that other countries have kind of like better behavior in a way than Britain in terms of lockdown. That's what I've noticed. Obviously we've got an island mentality in Britain. It's very difficult to accept and listen to what we're told and be to kind of conform. So I think people feel it's really hard when they're not allowed out of their homes. So I think at the same time, when Black Lives Matters movement launched at the same time as we're under the coronavirus pandemic, I think obviously there was the issue with George Floyd and the police brutality in America. That's kind of affected the whole world, but it's also that combined kind of heightened effect with the pandemic. And to be honest, I feel, the racism has been ongoing, and we know that the police in America did the wrong thing. We know there's been police brutality, but the worst part is with George Floyd's death and the policeman kneeling on his neck. I think suddenly people start talking about it. Also, there's been a huge kind of amount of reflection within the society. People are thinking about the way they've behaved. For example, my sister, she planned to go to visit her friend when lockdown was lifted, and she said, could we get some paint? Because her friend asked her, could we buy some paint and bring it over? So we bought some paint, because there wasn't any in the shop near her friend. So we bought it, and I was waiting in the queue outside of, because of the coronavirus rules, I drove my sister there, I was waiting outside, and then two women stood in front of me, and it's the area we went to is a very, very white community, and they kept kind of looking at me, and I thought, oh, I know what's happening, this is all about Black Lives Matters, isn't it? Anyway, so I was in the queue, and then it started to rain, I was waiting outside, and these two women went into the shop, and then suddenly they changed their mind and came out straight away, and they said, no, you go in, you go before me. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's a bit strange. but you're being nice to me and letting me go in before you. And I thought, that's the attitudes, and attitudes are changing, you know, because you think, and that's because of the Black Lives Matters movement. So attitudes are starting to change. It started to get people thinking, you know, when I walk down the street now, people wave at me and I'm like, all right, then who are you? I don't know you, but I'll wave back. That's a bit strange. I've kind of noticed these subtle changes in society. So maybe it was the right time for Black Lives Matters to really campaign. Maybe throughout coronavirus, we've learned something as a society. I know people have gone to the beach and ignored social distancing, and it's terrifying. I do understand that. Sorry, maybe I'm not answering your question very well, Martin. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's just that I was, you know, what I see is a division in the society, whereas you got, as you say, some people have reacted really well to Black Lives Matter, and you know, it's something I publicly support, and I publicly deplore racism or homophobia or anything like that. So I'm just seeing, you know, there's just a huge amount of people who a bit of a backlash, if you like, and I'm just worried because right-wing sort of lies has been going on for probably 3-4 years now. So I was worried that we're all going to go backwards, and so that was what the question was about, really. But there was a really good answer in any case. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Minky, for answering that. I realised we've only got 5 minutes to go before Ruth wrapped up. It's been a fantastic discussion and very important discussion as well. I feel that I want for, if you wanted to, for Rinku or Maral to talk about your next step as an artist, because we want to know what you could be doing and what your plan for the future in terms of the art practice.
My aim is to make people aware of the deaf community within society. It's about improving access. And also, if we look at America and we learn our lessons from America, so many countries support America, and they've supported the Black Lives Matters movement, and movements are working together to become strong, to become a campaigning voice. So that's really my aim as a deaf artist. I think we are only a small group of people, so we need to find deaf artists, we need to listen to their experiences, we need to work together. We don't want people to give up because there are so many barriers. I think we need to work together as a community, an artistic deaf community, and actually amplify this discrimination. We can show this discrimination that we've experienced and see if we can broaden our access to the things that we need access to. But I think it's about power and empowering ourselves as a collective. And yeah, Rinku's ready to go. So, and I think at the moment, I've got 3 projects ongoing at the moment. So I've got my own show called Made in India / Britain with the word India crossed out. And this is an autobiographical show. It's a one-man show. And the central question of the show is, where do I belong? The fact that I've had to move around a lot. And this was directed by a director called Daniel Bailey, who works at the Bush Theatre in London. And that was supported by Birmingham Rep Theatre. So that's a complete package ready to tour. So that's one project that I've got. The other one is a project called Bubble and Butch. This project is my journey into directing. So the story is about a deaf, obese man. He's 35, he's got no friends, he's incredibly isolated, no one visits him. And actually I'm using Bubble as a character to reflect the real members of the deaf community that are out there incredibly isolated. And one day, Butch the dog gets dropped on Bubble, and Butch is owned by an old black school friend of his. They haven't seen each other for ages. And Bubble's old school friend says, please, please, please look after Butch for me while I go on holiday. And Butch basically changes Bubble's life. He scares away bullies in the neighborhood. A woman on the street sees the dog and loves the dog and likes Bubble, gives Bubble her number. So the dog's very cool. Suddenly he gets a job as a security guard because he's got this mean dog with him. So the dog becomes a lucky charm for Bubble. And when his friend comes back on holiday, he wants the dog back, and that is going to affect Bubble's life. Is Bubble going to go back to normal? So I had a £10,000 R&D commission from Unlimited to research and develop this show, and I actually made it as a mixture of film and theatre. So when you sorry, just had a screen pop up. So when you're in the flat, it's a real life on the stage action. When you go out of the flat, it's film. Sorry, and the third project, sorry, I'm catching up because of the screen popping up. Third project. And my third project is called Chocolate. And so this story I found when I was visiting and working in the south of France, visiting friends in the south of France. And it was about the first black clown ever in the world, which amazed me. So I did some research about Chocolate, and he was actually part of a black and white clown duo. And they were in France performing around 1870, 1880. So, but unfortunately the white clown would slap Chocolate, punch, kick him, all the slapstick to make the audience laugh. The audience thought it was hilarious. And actually Chocolate became incredibly wealthy. In the end, he fell out with his white colleague. And the story is absolutely incredible. So I found some old black and white clips of Foutit and Chocolate performing. And, but the story, you know, has kind of scattered to the winds. Lots of records were destroyed in both world wars. So I've been trying to find more information out about Chocolate. So I'm working, I'll be Chocolate, inspired by Chocolate. And then I'm working with a white actor who studied at Le Coq, which is the French physical theatre school in Paris. And so Chocolate really inspires me about my experiences. Chocolate moved around the place like I've moved around the place to avoid discrimination. So those are the three projects that I'm doing at the moment. So Chocolate is going to be developed with support from Camden People's Theatre and Offsite Commission as well. So we're looking for venues and outdoor spaces to develop Chocolate. And we're thinking hopefully we can take it to outdoor spaces in 2021.
Thank you, Rinky. I'm going to pass over to Ruth to wrap up.
Can we all just give a big thank you with waving our hands and the screen to all the speakers and presentators today. I mean, these issues are really big. We haven't got long to do a big wrap up, but one of the things that I'm very aware about, we're looking at different issues and the reasons why people are so discriminated against, and it's very insidious when it comes to some of the direct and indirect discrimination. I know as a deaf woman with an hereditary hearing deafness gain, as I say, I'm changing the language. I hate that deafness is always framed in a negative way. I love my deaf culture and things, but when I was pregnant with my first child, I was told I'd be irresponsible to continue with the pregnancy because it could be born deaf. They're the sort of issues we're fighting off that people just don't think about. I want artists to flourish in DAC. I want us to find ways forward to be able to look at these issues. I also think it's quite unfair that a lot of us have to always do art that's battling the right to be included. We need to get the mainstream to understand the wholeness of our lives and what we need to be doing as we move forward. I really do thank you for being in the poll. Just a couple of things we're going to ask, the room, is we're going to do a poll, and that will come up on the screen. If you can just fill it in for us. Save the chat by clicking on it. You can select it all and cut and paste and put it into a Word document so you can keep reading through what's being said, the comments from each other. We are going to do another one of these on the 24th of July, same time, same sort of format, and this is on dwarfism and humour, particularly the fact that the BBC has called out racism and humour and taken a lot of that comedy out, but they're not doing it around disability or deaf issues, and people with that condition are leading that conversation, and we're really pleased that they are, because we need to call out all these sort of things, but we need to really get alongside our sisters, black sisters and brothers of colour, so that we can really see where we're the problem and not be afraid to be challenged and not be afraid to challenge ourselves as gatekeepers. I'm so aware of that in my role, and I want ideas and I want to be called out if I do anything wrong. And I'm sorry for the things we have done wrong in the past. Just help us get it right and help us move forward together. So thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for Johnny for putting this together, for contacting Rinku and Meryl, and for Rachel for doing everything, and for you all for being here. So we'll just leave it open for a few moments for the poll to come up. But Diolch, and see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Well done.